Good morning. We are going to go ahead and get started for our second session. My name is Lori Hurwitz. I'm the Associate Dean for the College for Programming and Student Services, and I am your orientation host. I hope you've had a wonderful few days, and we look forward to continuing our celebration this afternoon. Our Dean of Students, unfortunately, wanted to be here to welcome you today, but unfortunately cannot be, so I wanted to offer his welcome to the college on his behalf. Thank you for attending this session. We hope that you will be able to provide some useful information that will really be a great starting and jumping off point for both you and your students over the course of the next 4 years. Our desire is to build a partnership with you for your students' success and really be able to support each other in some of the work that we're both trying to do to make sure that your students are graduated happy with a job or graduate school admission in hand and ready to move out on the rest of their life. The college welcomes hearing from parents when you have concerns about things, and you'll hear from many of our panelists today about different ways that you can go ahead and do that. And overall, our goal is just to offer empowerment for students and help them take charge of their own lives and feel like they're in a position to make good decisions. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dave Thomas, who is a student in the class of 2015, who's going to talk to you a little bit about his own experience. Dave?
Thank you, Lori, and good morning, parents. I realize that with residence hall move-in, opening convocation, and family orientation, there's a lot going on in these couple of days, and it can be overwhelming. You're processing a lot of information very quickly, and so thank you. Thank you for giving us some time to share some insight into the coming weeks and years. In reflecting on my own first-year experience, particularly my initial concerns, my experience with the house system, and with my parents, I want to help sharpen an image of what first year is like. And I want to help you understand where you as a parent can contribute most to your child. Again, my name is David Thomas. I'm a rising fourth year. I'm majoring in biology. And outside of class, I compete with the University of Chicago swimming and diving program. And I work in public health. This past summer, I took the MCAT. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask me during the Q&A. Now, 3 years ago, I was a wide-eyed first year, nervously anticipating meeting classmates, signing up for classes, and joining RSOs. I was excited about being here, but I was nervous. I was anxious. I realized that UChicago is well ranked. I mean, we all hear about how well graduate students do. There's 80-something Nobel laureates, and I'm just a kid from Kentucky. I don't know if I can keep up with that. I wondered, am I smart enough to be here? Am I interesting enough to be here? Will I fit in? Will my roommates think I'm weird? Will I take the right courses? Will my professors like me? These questions came up and surfaced during orientation and before. Fortunately, college programming provides a number of opportunities for students to set up a network and a support system right when they get on campus, so that when they come, they have answers to these questions. They have people that they can look to. They have health counselors and career advisors, class mentors. And one of the parts I want to focus on is one of the fundamental parts of this support system is the housing system. The house system is where students can feel that kind of sense of home. My first year house was Woodward in Max Central. And it's one of the largest houses on campus. It's popular among athletes, and it was an outstanding introduction to UChicago life. This is where I met people from completely different backgrounds, but who I could still connect to. These were people who I could study with, laugh with, cry with, just talk with. These were people who manned the front desk, were my RHs, were my RAs. They would check in on me. They would make sure I was doing well. I still remember study breaks with my RAs where they would make us ice cream sandwiches, and just the fact that they would do that and talk with us, speak with us at the end of the day was significant for us. Now, granted, even with this supportive house community, there are always adjustments that have to be made when living in any new place. Arguments with roommates, they'll come, they'll happen. Bad days will arrive every once in a while. But it's the people in the housing system that help you navigate that. And one of the greatest benefits of this is that as a first year, you get to interact with second, third, and fourth years. And that might not seem significant, but it's actually invaluable. Talking to people who have been through same things that you have been through is enormous. I still remember one of my good friends now, who was a third year at the time and is now working for Teach for America. He's doing really well, actually. At the time, he would actually go out of his way to buy me lunch every week just to talk to me and see how I was doing. Again, this might not seem significant, but it's actually one of the best and common occurrences that happen on campus. It's part of what motivates us, students like myself and others, to come for free back early just to welcome the new class. It's what inspires us to teach and to guide first years. These experiences with upperclassmen and with our fellow students are what push us to welcome each new class and to help them. Now, alongside this supportive community, though, there is an intense academic workload. I won't lie to you, it's hard in classes here. It's not easy, but it's not impossible. It is absolutely manageable. And in fact, if classes weren't hard enough, there's an enormous push and desire to get involved in as much as you can. My first year, I wanted to do as much as I could on campus. Yes, I want to be part of parliamentary debate. Of course, I'll join Model UN. I would love to be at the Bollywood movie marathon next Saturday. But it's very easy with difficult classes and these enormous opportunities to become overloaded, to be overwhelmed. And it's in moments like these that my parents contributed the most. Because when I called, and they let me call, when I called, they listened. I know that every parent here wants to hear their child's voice every day. At the very least, see a text, an email, a Snapchat that they're eating well, but those don't come as often as you'd like. There are gaps of silence. And some might interpret that as a bad sign. I'm here to remind you that they're not. And I know you know that because, well, parents know everything, obviously. But I'm here to remind you. One of the best things that my parents did was they let me control how often we spoke in the first month. My mother wanted me to call every day, every other hour, to be honest, but, well, that wasn't necessarily going to happen, right? But letting me control how we talked, letting me control the conversation. Instead of asking questions, they let me tell them the answers. They let me tell them the new world I was in, the experiences I was going through. They let me laugh and vent and cry, and after reminding me that I was loved, let me handle my own problems. This might seem small, and might not seem easy because these are your children after all, and it's kind of strange to imagine them growing up. I realize that. That being said, though, it makes an enormous contribution to our own self-confidence and sense of independence when you give us that little bit of just controlling us, telling you what's going on. And to be honest, being able to tell them about what's happening, they've noticed how I've grown over the years. They've seen how I've changed. And I've noticed that that's what they really love. That's what they really cherish, hearing how I've changed and how I've grown up. You can't always be here. You're not supposed to always be here. At some point, you have to let us take control. And even though you're not here, there are always plenty of resources from the Office of the Dean of Students, from student counseling, student health services. But then again, I understand. I know these don't substitute what a parent does for a child. A counselor, no matter how good, a mess hall meal, no matter how delicious, can't replace what a parent does. My point is, it's not supposed to. At some point, we have to grow up. At some point, we have to take hold of the responsibilities and the roles that you've done for most of the time here. And so please keep in mind, when we tell you about these resources, they're not to take your place. In fact, we hope that you involve yourselves very heavily in your students' engagement and part here. The resources here, and my message to you is that your students will do well. They just need to handle some things themselves. And so, parents of the class of 2018, thank you for your time. We look forward to working with you, and welcome to the University of Chicago.
Good morning/afternoon. My name is Linda Tartoff. I am the Clinical Director of Student Counseling, and following Dave Thomas is always one of the hardest things to do. But here I am. So let me speak to you from with two hats on. I am the Clinical Director of Student Counseling Service at the University of Chicago. We provide and manage mental health services for students, all students, undergraduates, graduates, professional schools. We provide short-term counseling, medication management, study skills, help, a number of things that are really much more available on our website. So if you have any questions, speak to me after or check out our website. But a couple things I want to really bring home, and I think Dave mentioned them also. First of all, your students will be talking to you, and sometimes they'll be upset or distressed. And one of the things I want to say about our service is that there's really nothing too trivial or small. So I've worked at the university for 20 years, and I have students who come and they kind of come in my office and they look sheepish and they say, oh, this is too little. I feel so bad. This is so stupid. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And they feel bad because they feel bad. They feel bad because their dog died. They feel bad because their aunt is sick. They feel bad because their brother is not doing so well at home and has problems. And there's so many things. And I want you to help your student understand that there's nothing too small if it's distressing to them. So please, we sometimes see students for once or twice. Homesickness. This is going to be one of our issues. I can't stay here. I can't eat the food. I can't sleep in the bed. I have to go home now. This is pretty common, and honestly, we can generally get through this, because by next week, things are going to be a lot better. But having us to talk to and not worrying you sometimes has some advantages. The other thing that's also nice is when I see a student who says to me, my mom said I should come and talk to you. Actually, that says to me that you do have the kind of relationship that Dave talked about, and that at the same time you understand that sometimes it's good to have a non-involved person to speak to. So that's my student counseling hat. I will say as a parent that honestly we've been saying goodbye and trying to part from our children for 18 years. It started with walking and eating with a fork and going to preschool and eating their lunch at school and not at home and being out late at night. And now here you are. You're getting ready for the next big adventure. And you as parents have been working on this for a long, long time. I know this. The best analogy I can think of is that I know terribly cliched, but at the same time I can't think of anything better, and it's riding a two-wheeled bicycle. For you who have taught your children to ride a bike, there's no technology that really can take the place of a parent holding the back of the bike. When kids start wanting a bicycle, they get a really nice bike, they want a nice fancy bike, you want a safe bike. So you go and you buy a bike, and oftentimes your two-wheeler has training wheels. And the young person gets on the bike and they look at you and they are happy and they're going, I am riding, I am grown. This is like high school. They don't actually know that you're still behind them and the training wheels are still on, and that's why they're riding. You've watched them, you've nurtured them, you've purchased the bicycle, and now the training wheels are coming off. You've been there, you've always been there, you will be there, and right now, over this last summer, you've been pushing them. They've been riding, they've been wobbling, but at this point, as starting yesterday and probably a little bit earlier, they are riding that two-wheeled bike on their own. It may be wobbly, and they may fall down some, but the fact is they're riding, and you are letting them go yet one more time to us. So we really appreciate your faith in us. I would like to introduce a member of our team that helps your students tremendously as they continue their wobbly ride to the start of the University of Chicago. So Jennifer, who is our Executive Director for College Housing and Residential Services, will now speak to you. Thank you so much.
Good morning and welcome. As she noted, I'm Jennifer Luddig-Komratsky. I'm the Executive Director for College Housing and Residential Services. It was a joy to welcome you to the college houses yesterday. As I've shared with a number of parents, I have to admit that move-in day is just about my favorite day of the year. This marked my 17th move-in day, so I've seen a lot of boxes. And it's a tremendous opportunity for you and your student as you join us here at the University of Chicago. I've been here since 2011, and I instantaneously knew that this was a special space. So I hope that you also felt that yesterday. Our goal was that none of you carried a single box, and I hope we achieved that as you saw students throughout campus willing to help. That's the sort of thing that I hope you experience throughout your time here at the university. We're welcoming both you and your student to our family here in the college houses. We have about 3,000 students across campus in 38 different houses. We have about 50% of our students are first-year students, and the remaining made up of second, third, and fourth years. So know that there's always a place for you in college housing. These houses are interdisciplinary, and that's purposeful. We don't have a house, we don't have theme housing. We have places where we purposefully want students coming together with different ideas. The University of Chicago is about debate, it's about inquiry, it's about tough conversations, sometimes at the house tables, whether that be an academic conversation or one perhaps about superheroes. We hope that those conversations are happening within the college houses. It's a great place to learn to be a young scholar. You're surrounded by terrific academic and intellectual leaders, whether that be your resident assistant, who is your student's fellow colleague in the classroom, or a resident head who is an advanced graduate student. Perhaps it's a faculty fellow who we like to think of as friends of the houses. These are colleagues across campus, faculty members across campus who are interested in joining for conversations. They'll stop by the houses, they'll stop by the house tables, they may bring their friends into the college houses. And then our resident masters, we have 6 resident masters across the college houses. They live here with their families, oftentimes young families. So as Linda talks about those learning to ride their bike, sometimes they truly are very small. And sometimes they're students, your students, who are trying new things here in the classroom as well as in the college houses. So these conversations happen at house tables, they happen at study breaks, they happen in study rooms, music rooms. Throughout the college portfolio, you'll see that there are opportunities for your student to participate, and I hope you encourage them to do that good work. Our academic communities, again, they're about debate and conversations. You may get phone calls that say, oh, I can't talk to my roommate anymore. Do you know that they think that Superman is better than Batman? How could I possibly be matched with this type of a person and spend all of my time together in 110 square feet? In many ways, that's the start of trying something new as a young adult. How is it that you move past that? Some of those conversations will be quite simple, the battle of superheroes. Others will be much more complicated. I hope you support your student as they figure out how it is that they move past some of those early conversations. Perhaps they stay up late and their roommate goes to bed early. Perhaps one person likes cheese sandwiches and the other person likes something else. These are the conversations that can get awfully heated in a residence hall room in 110 square feet. So I hope you reach out to us and support us as we help your student through some of those tough conversations. So we think of the University of Chicago as our very own backyard, our very large, incredibly wonderful backyard. We have the opportunity to take your students to some of our cultural centers, museums, perhaps at Second City, or perhaps it's right here on campus with International House or the Institute of Politics. You'll see that our students, through their resident heads, faculty fellows, and resident masters, will have an opportunity to participate in far more than they'd ever have time for. We also, we're starting on a new relationship as you are with your student. Our primary point of contact is your student. We have that in common. I hope you reach out to us as you have concerns and know that we'll be doing more listening than we are talking. These are the sort of conversations that parents have concern. We want to hear from you and know that we'll be passing on that information in a private way to their resident head to say, maybe there were some concerns and let's reach out to this student a little bit more frequently to see how we can be supportive. But we do want to hear from you when you have concerns and you think maybe something doesn't sound quite right. Let us know how we can be helpful. So earlier this year, as the resident assistants came back from their summer, we asked them for their tips for the incoming class of 2018. And as we looked at what some of those top 5 tips were, we realized they're very appropriate also for our parents and families. So let me take a minute to share with you what our resident assistant thinks are the top 5 tips for our incoming class. The first is participate in house events. And I hope you've heard that as thematic as you have been in the houses and if you've heard from us today. There are many opportunities for you to participate in and connect with your house, both for you as well as your student. 2, focus on academics. And we were quite pleased to know that academics was at least number 2 on the top 5 list. There are many, many ways that your student will be able to learn and grow and stretch intellectually here at the University of Chicago. And expect for there to be some bumps along the way. First, midterms tend to start about week 3, and that tends to be a time where there's a phone call from your student who says, I don't know, I'm not so sure how this is going to work out. Know that that is a common experience amongst the first-year class, and there are resident heads and RAs who are there to support them, certainly in the college houses. Number 3, try something new. This is an amazing environment. There will be days of the week where they couldn't possibly participate and try in all the new things that exist here on the college campus. So perhaps it's trying a new food in the dining hall or going to an event they've never been at before or engaging in something that they've never tried before. I hope you encourage them to try new things as they're here. Be good to each other. This is probably one of my favorite tips. Be kind to each other, be good to each other, reach out to someone new. Your students have an incredible opportunity to be supportive of one another, and they'll expect to get that back. So I hope that also applies to you all as your student learns and grows. And then lastly, I hope this is your favorite on the list, call your parents. I hope this is a good reminder. Set up a time and a way that you're communicating with your student as they embark on this new experience. As your high school student turns into a young adult here at the University of Chicago, find a time that works for you. Think of this as a lifetime habit that you're getting into. Maybe it's multiple calls per week, maybe it's every Sunday afternoon, maybe it's a text message, maybe it's an email train. Whatever it is that might work for you, I hope you reach out to your student and find a new way to communicate with them as they themselves are learning and growing. Thank you again for bringing them here to the University of Chicago. It's our pleasure. We're very excited to get to know them better as they start their 4-year experience here. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ravana Popoff. I'm the Deputy Dean of Students in the college, and I will be talking to you about the college advising system. The college advising system at the University of Chicago is actually fairly unique among the Ivy Plus peers. It's designed to really offer proactive advising. Very often at other schools, administrators will meet with students in a moment of crisis. They're failing a class, there's some emergency, something's happened, and so all of the energy is focused on repairing the damage. The idea with our advising system is that we're helping students anticipate concerns and issues before they actually become a problem. And so to the degree that students share information with us, follow through with their meetings, we want them to have a fairly smooth experience to the degree that a college student can have a smooth experience over the 4 years here at the University of Chicago. The advisors typically have about 200, 250 students assigned to them, and they're meeting with students at every point of the year. In the first year, students are expected to meet with their advisor 3 times. Thereafter, they're expected to meet with their advisor once per year. The truth is, however, that most students check in with their advisors every quarter, even if it's just an email with a quick question, and advisors are open to that and actually hope for it. Again, sometimes students, if they don't have full information, will make choices that don't necessarily serve them in the end. And so if they're talking to parents, if they're talking to advisors, and they're talking to faculty, they can be making informed decisions for themselves. Students often misunderstand the title of academic advisor, and so they think, well, I just talk to them about academics. And the truth is we talk about an array of issues, and so there is the academic advising where we're working with students to understand the core requirements, to think about the kinds of courses they should be selecting, to put together a complex program. Our students are so ambitious. I want to do a triple major in biology and art history and economics. And you don't know me, but I can actually do this. And so we'll sit down with them and map it out, and then it becomes clear, wow, I'm surprised you can actually do this. Or, you see, you can't actually do that. It depends on the individual student, so we try to offer individualized advice. We understand that everyone's an individual. We're not bureaucrats. We talk to the advising staff. We are not bureaucrats, so when a student comes in, we're not giving them a set of canned advice that would apply generally to the entire student body. It really is focused on that one individual student. Once students declare their major, they actually get an additional advisor. So they're getting the faculty advisor in the major, and then they also have their college academic advisor who's helping the student think about how to put together multiple programs, think about how to complete requirements, other requirements for the degree, and also how to plan for, summers, or what do I do with this? Who should I be talking to in the university? So that's sort of what makes sense to student about academic advising. What they don't understand is that we actually care about anything that might affect their academic progress. So if there's a difficulty at home, an aunt being sick, or God forbid some other more serious issue, we know that that's going to affect their ability to focus in the classroom. Sometimes it's more mundane issues. I broke up with my boyfriend and I'm just crying all of the time and I feel betrayed. Clearly the student is not thinking about the humanities sequence. We kind of want to hear about that, because if a faculty member calls us and says, Ravano is such a good student and she just seems vacant right now. She is not engaged in the class. Is there something going on? Typically, if I got that call and I did know what was going on, I'd say, yes, Ravana is having a difficult time. I'm connecting her to resources and I'm encouraging her to talk to you so that she can make up any missed work or just sort of touch base with you so that you know that she's still engaged. So those are the kinds of issues that students don't often know to talk to us about. If we're successful in building that relationship over the 4 years, then it comes about naturally in a conversation. So we'll talk to students about academics, and then I'll say, well, how are things going elsewhere? Did you apply for the internship? Did you visit your family over Christmas? Did this happen or that happen? And then I can sort of put together the pieces of the student's sort of life in the college. And so please, please, please encourage your students to talk to us broadly about all of those sorts of issues. So I do want to let you know that we will meet with students 3 times in their first year. And again, we understand that this is a period of change. They're trying to figure out what they want. They're trying to figure out who they are. They're homesick. They're building new relationships. And so those 3 required meetings are touch points for us. So each term we're meeting with them to say, how are you doing? For most of our students, it's, I'm just fine. And they come in with a list of questions and they're totally in charge of that meeting. For other students, it's us pulling and asking different kinds of questions so that we can get a better sense of how they're faring in their first year. That's how we work with students. And at the end of 4 years, we hope that we've had a hand in cultivating independent, self-sufficient young adults. To that end, it also impacts how we engage with parents. We're trying to build relationships of trust with the student, and so we want them to be able to pretty much come to our office and share anything. Their anxieties, they're changing from pre-med to philosophy, and they want to be a philosopher, and they're looking at 8 years of graduate school after college, and my parents have always said I have to be a doctor. I don't know what to do with that. And so I'm not going to get on the call and say, uh-oh, they're a philosophy major, I know that's not what you wanted. But what I'll do is work with them so that they develop the language and the skills to be able to communicate that to you. And so I will say, likely your parents are concerned about you having, a stable life after you graduate from college. How can you convince them that that is actually something you can achieve with a philosophy major or becoming a philosopher? So we work with them. Sometimes in asking them those questions, they will come to conclusions on their own. But at the very least, they're learning how to talk with you directly. Sometimes parents will not receive a lot of information regarding academics, and they will call the advisor wanting to know how a student is faring in his or her classes. That is not information that we will share with parents. FERPA is a policy that prevents us from doing that without explicit consent from the students. However, you do have access to that information because you pay tuition bills, and it's not unreasonable for you to say, I need need to know how you're progressing from term to term. If you're not getting that, I sometimes talk with students and say, this is why you need to share this information with your parents. But that's information we're expecting the students to share with you. Other things that sometimes happen, a parent will, if they haven't heard from their child, they will contact the advising office. We're probably the primary contact for you on campus, and so we will not necessarily share information. I won't go to the dorm room and observe the student, take notes to bring that back to you, but I will share your concerns with the student. And so if you call me and say, I'm really worried, I haven't heard from my child in 3 or 4 weeks, what's going on? Their affects seemed off, I will certainly get on the phone and contact the student's resident head, or I will go in the records to see if I found any sort of email from the faculty member. I'm managing that case, and you've just given me a really important piece of information that might be relevant given those other points of contact. And then I'll follow up with the student and say, this is what I understand is going on. How do we manage this? These are resources you need to take advantage of. And what's more, you're causing a lot of grief for your parents. You need to bring them in on this. If there's nothing going on, I'll say, come on, 4 weeks you haven't called your parents, they're investing in you, they care. You can't be considerate enough just to send an email and say, hey, okay. You're just gonna leave 5 messages unanswered, and then it's like, oh yeah, I forgot. Of course, I'll go ahead and do that. So I won't give you information, but I'm taking in information. Again, if something difficult is going on in the student's life, or if you've got to give bad news, you're halfway across the country, your son or daughter is here, you don't want to give them that information when they're alone, you're not sure how they're going to handle that, that's a phone call we would hope that you would make to our office to say, I've got to talk to my daughter about this, and I know it's going to be very difficult. I don't want her to be alone when she hears that. And so that's something that often happens, and we would be more than happy to facilitate for you. Again, it helps us support the child. I keep saying we want to make them independent adults, and then I call them children. That's so wrong. I got to correct myself with that. So the point I guess I want to make with you is that we are student-centered. We see ourselves as having primary relationships with the students. However, we also understand your role as parents, and we want to facilitate conversations and communication between you, between the student. What you should also know is if there's ever an issue of safety or concern, a health issue, where students hospitalized, we would get on the phone without hesitation and make that phone call to you so that you're fully aware of what's going on. So again, we're judicious about it, we're thoughtful about it, we're not reflexive and saying we're never going to share information with parents. We're just trying to make sure that the students are at the center of the conversation. I tell my students, your parents want to hear this from you first. They don't want to hear it from me first. I will follow up and support you or give extra information, but you need to communicate with your parents, especially if you want to be seen as responsible. So thank you very much.
Once again, I'm Lori Hurwitz from the College Programming Office, and I want to talk to you a little bit about how we will continue to support your student through their time in the college. We have an ongoing series for first-year students. We don't just say goodbye after orientation and start planning for next year, but we'll really stick with your students throughout their 4 years in the college. Again, an ongoing series for first years called Steps to Success that will help them plan ahead for what comes later, how to spend their summers, and how to be prepared to take advantages of all the opportunities that are available in the college for them. And we have programs throughout the students' 4 years. And we will also be back with them when they are getting ready to graduate and for senior week, and so we look forward to seeing you then too. I know it seems very, very far away, but it will be here before you know it. We also continue to be a resource for parents. I know many of you spent some time this summer on the phone or over email with my student staff and my professional staff, and we offer a variety of different resources for you to be able to continue to connect with the college. If you ever have questions, just general questions about vacations and holidays and things that are happening in Hyde Park, you can always use the CPO as a main resource, either through phone or email, and we're happy to continue to answer your questions. You received a calendar from us this summer with through the parent mailing that went out for orientation. You will continue to receive a calendar with important dates every summer for the entire time your student is in the college so that you know what's going on campus. We also have a quarterly newsletter, electronic, that is sent to all parents of students in the college that we have email addresses for. You should have received your first one in July. It goes out second week week of the quarter. If you are not receiving that email, please give us a call and we will check to make sure that we have updated information for you. We also have a vibrant parent website and online community where you can connect with each other. I encourage you to use that as your first stop for finding information about what's happening in the college, important deadlines, general information about resources. It's a great resource. And if you ever have things that you would want to see on that website, you should absolutely let us know that. So I guess my overall message is that the CPO is here for you as well. And if you have any concerns or questions during your students' time in the college, we want to hear about that. But this is also an opportunity for you to become part of our academic community. Our parent and family program is a great way to become involved, and it's actually a group of different offices that are working to make sure that resources are available to you as parents of our students. And our goal is to grow support for the college through engaging with the UChicago parent community, both by volunteering, attending events, and giving to the college. So there's opportunity for everyone to pursue their own interests and support different career development and family-focused events for the students. You can take part in, obviously, our communications. You can host events on behalf of the college, as well as serving as ambassador to other students and families who are interested in coming to the University of Chicago. There's dedicated staff to answer your questions, and again, the website is a terrific resource. There will be many UChicago events that are happening both on campus and across the world that you can take part in. The Alumni Association events are open to you as parents and as members of our community. These include professor lectures, parent-specific gatherings, athletic events, and again, those Alumni Association events. So we will publish that information in the calendars and as well as in the quarterly newsletters, and you can visit our websites for more information. We have plenty of time for questions and answers. I have a student director, Emily, who's going to be here to bring around a microphone to ask questions, so if you want to raise your hand. I want to let you know, as she makes her way out and find some parents that have questions. So this session goes for about another 20 minutes. Your students right now, when you see them again, they will have attended their first registration group meeting as well as their first Chicago Life meeting, and they're going to be full of information to share with you over lunch. We will be completely clearing and closing down Rockefeller Chapel in anticipation of preparing for the opening convocation this afternoon. So I know some of you will try to save seats. It won't work, I promise. So if you want to head over to your assigned dining location for lunch to meet up with your student, doors will open at the chapel as well as several off-site viewing locations starting at 2:15. So you can look in the Family O-Book for your different options for that. I think we have a question in the back. Emily, go ahead.
I really appreciated each one of you said several times that we could contact you if we had questions or any concerns, but could you say slowly again the name of your office and your name?
My name?
Yeah, each one of you, because it's not written down in the O-Book.
Sure. So my name is Lori Hurwitz. I am the Associate Dean for College Programming and Student Services, and you can find me at the College Programming Office, where you have been calling and emailing this summer, and most of your communications come through my office. Another way to contact us is through the Parents website, which is parents.uchicago.edu, and there is a section of both the Parents website and the college calendar that has contact information for all the different offices that are represented on the panel today, as well as the different sessions that are happening in Idanoise.
Great, thank you.
Your students are going to be tied up till noon, so you might as well stay and ask all your questions now. I see a lot of people leaving. We have some questions up front. Emily's making her way up. Keep your hands up so she can see you.
My question is about the transition to a quarter system. Most of the students, I believe, would be in a semester system, so a 10-week quarter system would be quite fast. So is there anything that you guys are doing to help with that?
Dave, do you want to talk about that from a student perspective?
Sure. So in high school, I was on a semester system, and moving to a quarter system was pretty quick. In first year, you work with your advisors to pick classes to make that transition easier, to find people to help talk to. And again, with the house system, you have upperclassmen who you can talk to help make that transition easier. But it takes some responsibility on the students' part to just make sure that they're on top of their homework and make sure they're on top of their work. Quarter system is fast, but you pick it up pretty quick. So.
Hi, good morning. It sounds like there are lots of places to call if you would like some help with your child or if your child is having a problem, but who would you, in terms of triaging, what's the first who's the first office to call? I think that's not clear to us.
Well, it depends. So if there's an immediate emergency, you want to call the dean on call. But if you have general concerns, you're trying to figure out what's going on, you should call the college advising office. Your student is meeting their advisor for the first time right now. Ask for that name. You call the advising office. I'm the parent of Tom, and I'd like to speak with his advisor. The advisor will hear your concerns. We tell students, we don't know all the answers, but we know where to find them. I would say that to you as well. We won't know all of the answers immediately, but we would know where to direct you and to give you supplemental information.
Questions, raise your hand high.
Was there someone over here?
I have a question about declaring majors. When do students typically start doing that, and when does the student advising basically starts encouraging them to decide on their majors? What's the typical time frame?
So depending on the path of the student, we begin talking to them about potential majors now. So that's primarily with the sciences, because we know that there are foundational courses that they need to be engaged in just to have the option to declare a major in their second or third year. Similarly, there are majors like classics, where they expect a foundation in the classical languages, and so they need to be engaged in those courses now in order, again, to have the option. And so we'll talk about that, but we try not to have it written in stone, because we realize they're young, they're here, they come in with a firm idea of what they want, and then they're exposed to all of this other information, and suddenly it's, wow, I could be doing this, or I could be doing that. Typically what happens is we want students to declare. They can change their mind, but we want students to declare by the end of their second year. We want them to declare just because we want them to begin engaging with the departments and connecting with them and doing that sort of thing. But we try not to put too much pressure on them in their first year, because this whole universe is new to them.
Thank you. You talked about a list that prior students shared, number 2 being academics. My question is, was that list shared with the students?
So we don't want to give the list too much credit. So the list came from an exercise during our resident assistant training that happened about 2 weeks ago. And as we were interacting and sort of talking about what's most important for incoming students, there were hundreds of ideas of things that were most popular and they thought was the best advice and wisdom that they could pass on to other students. So as they narrowed them down, there was a ranking exercise, and that's how they got their rank. I think these items, thematically, when you look at a UChicago student's experience, these are items that we do hope bubble to the top.
The reason I ask that, my daughter talks about student life for the past 3 months here, and that discussion rarely talked about academics.
Yeah, it's about to shift for her in a real serious way.
Good. Good. Thank you. And that's been communicated with her as the week goes on?
Yes.
Ask her again a week from Friday.
Yes.
How she's feeling about that.
Thank you very much.
Excellent advice. Ask in a week. And again in 3 weeks when she's preparing for her first set of midterms. You won't hear about me at all. It'll all be academics.
Hello. You spoke a little bit about finding direction and declaring majors. What resources are you giving, advising obviously, to the students coming in that are kind of undecided, have a couple strong points, and just aren't sure where they're going?
So sometimes, we have over 75 academic programs. It can be totally overwhelming to us, let alone to a new student. I start out by asking students what they don't like. And so once students begin exploring that, they're not totally undecided. So you'll have a student come in and, I don't know what I want to do. And I say, okay, do you want to be a chemistry major? No, no, no. Or I don't like writing. That helps me pare down that range of options for them and get them to focus a little bit more. And so in the first year, in addition to the core classes, if a student is, say, inclined toward literature, I will try to help them find courses that are listed between departments so that they can get a sense of how that literature might be taught. So I might say, well, take a Romance languages course, literature, if they've placed high enough in terms of the language. language, take a comp lit course, take an English course, just so that you can get a sense of how the different disciplines approach literature or writing and that sort of thing. So I try to get them in the classes. The other thing that we do is really encourage them to go to departments. A lot of times students will only meet with faculty during office hours, again, when there's a problem. People love to talk about themselves, so I will tell the student, go during office hours. I can guarantee when it's not midterm time, the faculty member is sitting there twiddling his or her thumbs. And so if you go in and say, can you tell me about your discipline? How did you arrive at your focus? What are some things I should be thinking about as a student? That faculty member will be more than happy to engage them. And so if I have a sense of a student that they're inclined towards social sciences, physical sciences, humanities, I will actually give them a list of, go talk to this department, and this department. And that actually helps them as well. Very often it's them taking a class and just being blown away by a particular faculty member who suddenly offers insight into a particular field of study, or is just so dynamic and engaging that the student begins to look at that field in a very different way. So some of it's programmatic, some of it's just a sort of natural discovery.
There's also a variety of academic information sessions over the course of orientation week, and so if they even have an idea of what they'd like to study, and maybe it's not necessarily a major, but they know they're interested in the social sciences or humanities, there's opportunities to talk to faculty in those different areas and learn about the different opportunities as well.
And the core is really designed to expose students to all of these disciplines. So they come in thinking they know, we know they don't. Over the course of the year, they're exposed to all of that, and that hands-on engagement is really how they discover what they love.
Do parents have access to students' schedule and their grades? If that's not automatically granted, is there any way we can have access?
You can ask them for it. So that's what you'll want to do. You will tell them, I want your schedule. When you register for your classes, tell me what you're registered for. If you expect grades at the end of the term, you should ask for that. A lot of times parents are reticent because they don't want to push too hard with the student, so they will contact the advisor and say, I would like this information. We will steer you back to the student, and what we'll do is talk to the student about why that's a reasonable request on the part of a parent. So ideally, they're communicating directly with you.
Thank you.
I have a question for the student athletes. How, as a university, support them to compete for this university and do as well as academically? Thank you.
So I'm going to ask Dave to answer that question because he is actually a student athlete.
Yes. So generally speaking, I'm on the swim team, and so it's an enormous time commitment. But, for instance, if I do have an academic conflict, for instance, during our championship season, we have to miss an entire week of school. And as we said before, academics is pretty rigorous here, so missing a week can be hefty. Fortunately, professors and your coaches tend to work with you to work around the schedule, to help you to take your midterms early, help you get homework on time. But the onus is on you as a student, because coaches will tell you you're going to miss this week. You then have to follow up and tell your professors ahead of time rather than after the fact. So the school is willing to very much guide you, but then you have to follow through with it.
I think overall we have found that faculty tend to be much more pleased when students are proactive about their plans when they need to miss class for athletics or religious observances or other reasons. So we just encourage them to make sure they introduce themselves and let them know in advance. And faculty are absolutely willing to work with students, but you're always better off going ahead of time than coming back after the fact and saying, I missed a class and now I need to make up. And the coaches are very intentional about talking to the student athletes about planning ahead for that.
Hi, I had a question about academic advising, and I know that a lot of students have different interests, and what happens if there isn't a good connection or a good match between a student and a faculty advisor? And is there an ability to make a change, or, because I know that can be tricky.
So there are two. So with the college advisor, they get assigned to, it's sort of random in many ways. There's not a perfect match, and we're all trained as generalists. But if for whatever reason there was a dynamic that prevented the student from being able to get the information that he or she wanted, whatever that is, then the student could contact the dean of students and say, this is, there's always a conversation behind it, so it wouldn't be automatic. This is what I'm feeling, and I'd really like an advisor change. So that can be done because we're all humans, and there's chemistry or there's no chemistry, and sometimes we rub each other the wrong way. With faculty advisors, it's very different. And so for some departments, the primary faculty advisor is the director of undergraduate studies, and that's a formal appointment. And so if the student doesn't mesh with that faculty advisor, they can't request a change. But what happens is there's a conversation with the college advisor, and we work with the student to figure out what's going on and how to manage that relationship. If there was ever anything where it was just like impossible, which I've never witnessed myself, then there's always a path to manage that, but it can't just be, I don't like the faculty advisor as much, or I'd prefer to work with this person. The other thing too is there's a network of support, and so there are people in formal responsibilities and formal roles, but I'm always pushing students to go out and build relationships with a range of people across campus who are advisors, but also a range of faculty. So regularly, beginning in the second year, I will say to a student, if you were to apply to something and they required 3 letters of recommendation, would you be able to produce those letters? And sometimes it's yes, I can do that. Sometimes it's no. And I will use that as an incentive for them to go beyond the people in the formal roles just to build those relationships across the university.
Other questions?
Hi, thanks for all the good information. My question is, if a student for some reason decided they needed to drop a class, can you walk me through how that might work?
So I will let Dave tell you the first version.
Okay. So I have had to drop a class. And what happens is when you're in your first year, usually you'll go through your core classes first rather than shopping. But as you go up in the years, you'll have this period of shopping where you can pick classes that are more specialized, more interesting to your particular pursuit. And for me, that's biology. And there might be a class that seems really great on paper, and then you go for a class for a week and you're like, I really don't like it. You can in fact drop that class for, I believe, the first 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. You have the option of dropping that class, and it won't count against you. After that, you'd have to formally withdraw from the class. But usually you can find out in the first 3 weeks whether or not you have a good relationship with the teacher or not. And you can actually do that online or with a it's a particular slip, I believe, yeah.
Thank you.
So I said that first just because students have a lot of agency, but in their first couple of years, I really try to encourage students to write to their advisor and say, I'm thinking of dropping this class. Can you think of any reason why I shouldn't? Sometimes there are implications for financial aid. Sometimes the student, that course will only be offered once per year, and it will set the student behind in their academic program. Once they're older, they know all of that information and they can anticipate that. But in their first and second year, early second year, I always encourage them just to let the advisor know what's going on.
Hi, so as an offshoot of that question, how easy is it to add a class or get the classes that you really, really want? Or do you run into wait lists and things like that?
So for foundational courses, so for instance, general chemistry is required for most of the science, so chemistry, biology, biochem. If a student wants to declare a major in any of those areas, they have to take general chemistry unless they have placement credit or test credit. And so there would never be an instance where a student could not get into general chemistry, just because that's formative for them in those majors. There are instances where students will have their sights set on one particular professor who teaches a section that only, captures 12 students. And that's where we try to get them to relax their expectations. So there's a high likelihood, given 4,000 students plus in the college, that they will not get into that type of course. But if there's a course that they need, students are able to get into those courses. It's just that it's not necessarily their preferred preference, meaning I want this exact section, I want this exact professor. It's just impossible to accommodate that sort of thing. But there will never be an instance where a student can't graduate because they couldn't get a course, or where they couldn't move forward in a major because they couldn't get a course.
Speaking of chemistry, are there tutors available for students that might have had kind of a weak preparation in their high school background?
Yes, there are tons of resources. There are the Harper tutors where students go after class and they meet with, typically they're trained as graduate students in the chemistry department. They can ask for help with a problem set. They're TAs, they're lab instructors, they're the professors themselves. There are collaborative learning groups where students come together and they work on solving problems together. So there are lots of different areas. Your child should never say, I couldn't find help. And again, if they're not able to connect to that, just send them back to their advisor, and the advisor will contact the multiple points and let them know where they should go.
And that extends beyond chemistry. It's
and that
available
extends beyond,
across the college.
Across the college.
When student is majoring econ and also on pre-med track, if the student finds it's difficult to keep the grades or the GPA in econ major, if they're switching into biology or chemistry, how hard it will be? I'm sure it's overlapping. Pre-med does has the biology and chemistry. So how hard it's going to be?
It depends on the individual student and when they decide they want to make that change. Both pre-med and econ have particular sequences of courses that they expect students to follow, and they're offered at different times of the year, and they're cumulative, so they're sort of foundational knowledge on which the rest of the curriculum is built. So depending on when they made that decision, if it's the end of third year, it would be really, really difficult. But if by the end of their first year, and so working with the advisor, if they said, I want to be pre-med and econ, the advisor will work with them to map out a schedule of courses for the year. If you're intent on this, these are the courses you should be taking and when you should take them. Very often, once a student is actually taking an econ course or a biology course, that gives them a sense of what they want, and then the decision is made from there. So it's rare that a student will get to their third year and say, oh, suddenly I've changed my mind. Usually it's probably early in their second year, and at that point, there's a lot that can be done.
Thank you.
Hi, this question, I have two questions. One for Dave, if you can flash back yourself to year one. And I hear a few different versions of this. Incoming student takes, following up on the transition from semester to quarter system, does a student take 3 courses? I've heard a hybrid, 3 courses for the first year, and then some of them have taken 3 in the winter, this semester going in, and then they've added a course that is for 2 semesters later. So is it 3 courses the ideal starting point? That's question number 1. Question 2 is on the advisement side. If we need some feedback from the advisor's side, can the parents get that feedback on our student?
So from the question directed at me, I took 4 courses my entire first year. And the courses I took my first year were mainly core courses. I knew I wanted to go into a science. Originally it was chemistry, but before I got into any special courses with that, I just went ahead and took care of the basic language, Hume, Soc, and it depends on who you are and what your extracurriculars are as to like what is ideal. 4 courses is manageable, absolutely manageable. I definitely think 3 courses is also manageable. I did that and swam, in addition to working and doing other things as well. So I do think it's manageable. Whether it's ideal or not will depend on how much effort and how much time organization you have and like planning out your courses. And again, your advisors are really helpful with that. I remember in my first year, part of the reason why I took 4 courses was because when I went to my advisor and said, I'm interested in majoring in science, she mapped out all of the courses I would take in 4 years and said, you can take 3 courses or 4 courses, you'd be ahead if you took 4. And she helped me pick out the courses that would be best for me. So for me it was 4, but that does not necessarily work for everyone. So.
That's part of what happens in the advising discussion. Sometimes students will want to follow an honors track and they're thinking of it like high school. Well, in high school I was in all honors classes. That's really not how it's seen here. You want to choose 1 or 2 honors tracks, and it should really depend on where you want to go with it. So for instance, honors calculus is really designed for students who are going into highly quantitative areas of study. Just because you're good at it doesn't doesn't mean you have to take it to that level, especially if you want to be, you want to focus on some area of the social sciences that doesn't require quantitative methodology. So sometimes it's getting students to relax because they're used to going full throttle in high school. And in the quarter system, it's just not something you can easily manage in the same way. So you want to be strategic about where you place your energies. But again, that depends on each individual student. So to your question about advising in terms of feedback, so this is a sticky situation for advisors because if a student is not doing well academically and they're completely cutting their parent out of that, and a parent senses something's wrong and they call the advisor, we're not in a position to say, yeah, Tom is really failing and he's just not going to class and these are all my concerns. That's something that you could not expect. What I would do is encourage the student to talk with you, and I'd say, look, your parents, if you end up on academic probation, that's a letter that gets sent to your home address. That is not the time you want your parents to learn that you're struggling, so let's talk about that. In the worst case scenario, sometimes it's an issue where the student is not communicating with the parent knows that something's going on. What I will do is contact the student and I say, I received a phone call from your parent. We're going to have a conference call. And so I want you to come in the office at this time. You coordinate with your parents at the best time to have that call. And we're going to have a frank conversation. But you're going to be the primary voice in that conversation. Is that the first time you want them to hear about it? Sometimes they say yes. But very often they say, well, no, let me have a call to my mom. It's easier to talk to my mom, or it's easier to talk to my dad, just to sort of prime them. And then in that conversation with the student present, I can be more frank because the student is agreeing to that. But offline, it's just an impossible situation that we can't engage in.
So we will stay here and continue to answer any questions that you have. Thank you very much. As a reminder, we will be clearing and locking Rockefeller Chapel. So please go ahead and meet your students for lunch at your assigned dining location.